Good evening and welcome to the school committee meeting for Wednesday, March 4th. We're interviewing a superintendent finalist candidate, Mr. Todd Bazydlo, principal of Shrewsbury High School this evening. Good evening, Mr. Bazydlo.
Good evening. Thanks for having me. I look forward to our conversation tonight.
Thank you. So I have the first question.
Sure.
What did you learn about the Shrewsbury Public Schools during your day in our district?
Well, a lot of confirmation, right? It's been a whirlwind of a day, but again, the work that we've conducted over the past number of years is certainly working well with our students and what I've witnessed in my interactions with staff, with families, but most importantly for me, students. To me, the best part of the day was visiting classrooms. When I met with the staff today, I talked about a classroom that I met here at Beal that was a first grade classroom, a very energetic, enthusiastic group of students who wanted to touch my tie, which was, it was great. And the teacher was like, remember our bubble space? So it was like interesting to see how they managed that. And the questions they asked, I mean, regardless if it was like the first grade and they were silly questions too, fourth graders, I met with a group at Coolidge, which I thought was a really great time. They had really thoughtful questions, which I was really impressed from. And then, visiting classrooms today at Floral. I just think I'm so impressed with our students, but the work that our staff is doing with the students and for the students and their families at Shrewsbury is like really incredible. Yeah, I mean, it was really confirming and like affirming of what we're doing because I think we're in a really good place. I think it's also like, it provided me a great opportunity. And again, I have the distinct opportunity of like visiting classrooms in the district, currently with our school leadership team and central office group monthly, which I find like that's probably the best part is when we get to go do that. And I love when they come to our school to showcase off our students and the conversation. So certainly that was great. The forums have been great. Everything has been great. That's a really well done visit. And again, I expected what I expected because the excellence that we have in the standards we've set. So yeah, it was great.
Thank you.
Sure.
I have the next question, and can you give us an example of how you have ensured that all students, regardless of race, ethnicity, gender, socioeconomic status, and academic ability, have equitable access to educational services?
Yeah, sure. So I'll just use my experience as the high school principal. I think when we look at our systems, we have to identify where there might be opportunity issues or achievement issues. I think what we've done, some of the things we've done is, I used this example earlier today, around how do we look at advanced access for advanced programming or advanced coursework at the high school. And that's a combination of advanced placement coursework done by the College Board and also advanced coursework as designated by the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. When I first arrived in Shrewsbury, there were a number of prerequisites that were barriers for students to gain access to that. We gradually began to roll those barriers back and remove those barriers, and you'll see it from our performance on our advanced placement in particular around the number of students that have access to it and then the types of scores that we generate from those exams. It was in the Boston Globe yesterday. The state had 36% of students getting a 3 or above. Shrewsbury High School had 91% last year. So I mean, a real tribute to the work that our community has done pre-K to 8 to get students to where they need to be to prepare for the high school, and certainly don't want to leave out the high school staff either because it played a pivotal role in that. So one of those issues we talked about was reducing barriers there. I think another thing that we talked about is how do we incorporate universal design for learning in classrooms? What's that look like? Provide teachers training, ensure all students have road off ramps or on ramps to access the curriculum. Continue our training in that area is really important. I also think of our world language program and how we've offered heritage languages, both in Portuguese and Spanish, to have students access that English might not be their first language and maybe Portuguese or English, rather Spanish is their primary language, to provide world language experience there. I think some of the courses that we've offered as it relates to this coming or next coming school year, like medical translation, interpretation, like that is a game changer for students who might not know what they're going to do but have English, a different language than English that they're fluent in. Additionally, I think offering the seal of biliteracy, we're again another district that had the highest number of students who qualified for a seal of biliteracy, meaning that you have to get a certain score in MCAS, and then you also have to take a proficiency-based test around your language acquisition, and then that gets reported out or scored, and then you gain that competency, which is reported on not only a transcript, but also our diplomas. And also, some private schools, many private college universities, and also public universities offer up to 12 credits. So we talk about reducing barriers not only for access here in the district, but what beyond the barriers we have. And that's one of those issues that we have with financial barriers. If we could provide a different avenue for students to gain access to post-secondary education through potentially having more credit-bearing courses, whether that's through advanced placement or sealed by literacy, that can reduce the number of years students have to be enrolled in a college or university. And really looking at the work we've done around subgroups in particular, and providing access to those courses. Like we've had, my school improvement plan that I presented to the school committee, I think back in December, showed the measurable gains we had across those subgroups: high needs, Ls, students with disabilities, and just the level of access and ability for students to actually succeed in those courses was really remarkable. And that's not a function of, that's not a function of the work that I've done exclusively. The work that happens is we set a vision, we set a direction, we provide support, and the teachers are doing the work. If we articulate what those things are for our people and try and tell them what the goal is, we can meet those goals. I feel confidently that we can meet those goals. So, those are a few issues we talked about, our programs that we've had or I've been a part of at the high school to increase equity for access and the financial equity as well for students that are attending the high school.
Thank you.
Sure.
It's me now. What strategies have you used to close the achievement gaps? Please provide us an example with an achievement gap that you have addressed and moved the needle.
Yeah, I just spoke to this in terms of for us, it's looking at the subgroups, which I just discussed, but looking at how we have access to advanced coursework. And that doesn't necessarily mean advanced placement coursework offered by the College Board. And I think one of the things we've done, I'm sure we'll talk about at some point, is career technical education, right? Providing opportunities for those students who might want to explore a potential career path. And traditionally, when we look at providing opportunities to reduce those gaps, it's literally providing the supports necessary to ensure they're going to meet some level of success in that course, but enrolling them and then providing supports as it relates to, do we need tutoring? Do we need additional scaffolding? What that looks like? Again, the major objective / goal that we've had in our improvement plan this year or last year from the high school that we reported on was our gains we made around advanced coursework, which aligned with our strategic plan, making more opportunities for students. There's a number of other, initiatives that we can consider and talk about as we move forward. I think providing students the best opportunity to be their best selves is one of the things that we strive to do. And that happens through a unified approach from looking at data in particular. And when we take a look at data, it's looking at where those opportunity achievement gaps may reside, whether it's in MCAS data, which is really a good bellwether for us at the high school because it's still administered in grade 10, provides a good opportunity for us to identify where students might not meet or our school might not meet a standard of what we believe the standard would be. We always score generally above the state average on everything in those tests, generally. Then we drill down, look at individual item analysis, then we look at classrooms and find out what the trends are, and then we address the trends with the treatment. Someone might need for instance, we've had an issue with mathematics recently at the high school. We identified people and we incorporated a really, I wouldn't say innovative, to me it feels again, I keep saying the novel, it seems like common sense to me, of identifying people who have mathematic gaps in their learning and then adding in a course called Math Connections. So our most needy students who might be behind grade level are given an additional dose. The treatment is an additional dose of mathematics. Students generally don't like it initially, but we staff it carefully with a mathematician for sure, and one of our most supportive staff members, a couple of them work through this, and we've had really significant gains of closing those gaps. So evaluating that, and then how we measure that for particular our math connections courses, when we look at like their performance on an assessment, like, are we aligning students to meet the next level coursework, whatever that might be? Have they met the standards and goals of what they're doing this year? And now are they able to be prepared for the next level of coursework? And if not, then we can retriangulate and have additional treatment. But high dosage tutoring focused on mathematics and the math connections program at the high school has been one of the things we've done to try and improve access equity for the groups that sometimes have issues. Sure.
Speaking of data, can you tell us about a time when data contradicted your initial assumptions about teaching and learning, and what actions did you take?
Yeah, this is a long time ago. Sorry to go with this math thing. I'm not a math person by trade, but when I came to Shrewsbury, I was the principal at the time, and the assistant principals basically told me that I was going to be the supplementary supervisor and work exclusively with our director of mathematics. So I actually took a course in the summer with the director to shore up my mathematics with her, and it was great. So I spent a lot of time in our math program at the high school during a lot of my formative time there. As we think about data, we take a look at MCAS data, and this came up pretty consistently throughout the years. Like, yeah, sure, we score great on the MCAS data, and it's like we have good scores and we're doing well. But when you drill down and we looked at the item analysis of each of those things, what we tried to identify was areas where our student performance was close to within 1 or 2 points of the state average. And we identified those as areas of needs of improvement. And then we looked at what those standards were. And we found that standards were particularly focused on geometry. So when the director and I met around the disaggregating the data and looking at what the data is, and then I said, I don't understand why. I mean, for me, geometry was one of the easier math courses, right? So I don't understand why we're not doing as well as individual items. And the director at the time basically said, one, we run an integrated program, and some of this stuff is covered at a different level, and they don't see it prior to the MCAS test. That's a problem, right? So we sat down and figured out what we needed to do, and part of that was what we implemented was like an MCAS problem of the day in the strand of geometry. Our teachers implemented it, and thankfully, I mean, with their support for sure, but thankfully we saw the scores increase around that particular strand. We also more recently looked at why our students struggle in pre-calculus. And I say pre-calculus, you've heard me probably say this before. Pre-calculus is like one of our hardest mathematics courses at the high school. It's trying to align some of the math standards that are in an integrated program that from Algebra 2 that get pushed to pre-calculus in our program. So we're working on making adjustments currently this year to implement so we don't have some of the same struggles that people have in pre-calculus, to ensure that they have a better experience, right? There's nothing more frustrating when you're in a class and you're struggling along, and it's like, if we could have just added another chapter to this topic and not put it in the pre-calculus program. So we're working on that, along with depth of knowledge standards and mathematical model standards. So work in progress, but those are some of the things that we've done to address specifically the data piece around MCAS, and also kind of adjusting our coursework around pre-calculus and advanced math 1, the feeder program.
We talk about technology in the classroom. We know how powerful a tool the iPad can be, but we also know the importance of traditional non-technology based instructions. Can you give any examples of how you've tried to balance those two approaches?
That's like the hot topic of the day. Well, again, I think a year or two ago, we've experienced this at the high school, like the power of AI. And I think students are always 2 steps ahead of the adults, at least me. So what we looked at and what we saw from our particular English teachers and some of our science teachers and our math teachers, like students not understanding, for instance, problem solving skills, whether it's a problem set in science or mathematics, or these really complex writing assignments that look really, really well done. Not the question, but certainly understand that if we provide students a prompt and they come back the next day with a 3 or 4 paragraph, really well done, not needing a whole lot of editing, like, okay, let's talk more about why. And consistently papers coming in like that with that level of, that don't match the level that we might do in the classroom. So some of the adjustments we made is really like going back to like, we're gonna do more in-person writing in the class to get an assessment of what your writing skills are. You know, we do reading quizzes because we also think that we have issues with literacy and people being focused on not reading the book and doing a summary of whatever it is. Like, we want to do reading quizzes of, did you actually read the book? And we need to get kids to read more. So trying to have some really novel approaches to complex problems. I do think, though, technology, we can't bury our heads in the sand and say that there isn't value in artificial intelligence and use of that, and how we actually can prepare our students. And I'm not sure what level, this is probably what the AI study group can help with, is where do we use it, when do we use it, how do we use it? Because right now, if you look at anything, you know, like this morning there's an article in Time Magazine about the top 200 colleges and universities in the world. And they have a methodology of how they did it. And I read it, and it was interesting, and I was intrigued by it. But at the bottom, there was like an AI chat prompt. And it basically is like, that's the world that everyone's living in. It's embedded everywhere. It's like it's like in the ether, it's in the vapor. So students are seeing it. Students are experiencing it in their own lived experience. So it's like, how do we leverage those things, Mr. Wensky, around like what that looks like? And how do we, most importantly, is like, how do we train our staff? Because our staff they're great, but it's another thing to do, right? They're struggling with the fact of like, how do we have these tough conversations with students around, I'm not sure if this is actually your work. So doing a lot of that work internally now, and carving out some instructional time, which I don't really like to say, but it's like, I think it's a necessary provision we have to take in order to ensure that we're doing right by our students and families. Like, we need people to be able to think critically, be able to collaborate, do their own work. Like, we're not going to solve problems with artificial intelligence is going to solve a lot of problems for sure. It also can lay people off pretty quickly, right? And that train has left the station, and I know that companies are, for instance, laying off administrative assistants because they believe the AI does the work now, and they have models that do that. But we have to be able to have people think critically about whatever the problem may be able to collaborate with each other and solve problems. And I think creating the spaces for that to happen within our classrooms, whether it's at the 5-6 middle school, the 7-8 middle school, or 9-12. Again, I'm not sure what it looks like at the pre-K to 4 level. That to me seems like it's out there. I mean, when I visited classrooms today, people were talking about Chat GPT. They got the initials inversed order, like Chat TPG, and I'm like, okay, well, I know what you mean. I know what you're saying. So, I mean, that's going to require some stewardship for sure, and partnering with our staff, but also the community members on what that looks like for their families.
Thank you.
School districts are often faced with implementing state mandates with limited resources. What creative approaches have you utilized that resulted in increased student achievement and academic success?
Wow. Geez. Well, again, I fall back to some of the things we're doing. The Math Connections course is going to get greater returns on our MCAS testing. I think removing barriers for advanced coursework is creating more academic promise. I think when we look at what the needs are of student in crafting programming, to have them explore what their needs are and have that achievement, whatever that might look like, that's important. You know, one of the programs we implemented a number of years ago and kind of morphed it from what it once was to what it is now, is that capstone project. And it's like achievement, how do you measure that achievement too? I know there's a lot of talk around policy and competency determination, graduation requirements. I'm not sure they'll be part of your questioning tonight, but you know, I have some opinions about that in terms of what I think our students should know and be able to do. I think, you know, how we're going to accomplish that, because I think we can easily, statewide policy can say everyone has says X, Y, and Z, but there's a cost for all that, right? In terms of our staffing, in terms of budgeting, in terms of curriculum, in terms of this, like what that looks like. You know, it's like, we're going to have financial literacy. I think that's awesome. I think that's a great idea. Okay, how are we going to fund it? And what are we going to put, how are we going to schedule it? And who's going to pay for it? And what's that look like? So I guess there's a bunch of different academic models we can look at. I think the biggest thing we've done is really looking at the students who have not performed necessarily well prior to the elimination of MCAS as a graduation requirement, and provide a remediation for them after school through writing a state grants and program that we've conducted there at the high school. And we've had success with that. And that helps propel students to take potentially higher level courses as a result of that stuff, those interventions rather.
Thank you.
You describe what your process would look like for budget planning, essentially like creating a district budget that would align to the strategic goals of the district.
Yeah, it's a great question. So I think, looking at how we've done this in the past, so I have a little bit of kind of a viewpoint of it, a different viewpoint, because I'm an insider, so to speak, the internal candidate. Is like the runway that we have now, there's lots of conversations, and I know that there has to be conversations with not only the school committee, but the town manager and the select board and the finance committee. But I think, our budget's 86% people. So you take a $100 million budget, 86 million is going to salaries and benefits and those things that to provide the humans, right? Now you're down to 14% or 14 million left to fund out of district special education, transportation, supporting athletics, curriculum instruction assessment, contracted services. You go down the list of your cost centers, right? So I think part of that is like finding what the fixed costs are, getting that down on paper, contractual agreements, what's the numbers for that, and getting those really tight for the following year, rolling that over in the summer and finding what the numbers are, and there's kind of like 86% of your budget's right there. Then finding what the contractual obligations are for transportation, special education, out of district, contracted services, what those obligations are, and then really trying to figure out like what are our needs and building those in through having conversations with, building principals, district leaders, instructional coaches, directors, assistant principals, and then continually refining that from the start of the, the behind the scenes work in the summer and the fall to presenting it to initial budget recommendation in the winter, to kind of fine tuning it and sharing with the finance committee, select board where we stand, and providing clear, transparent updates and presentations, and then ultimately kind of voting on, right, the budget, and then presenting that and being behind it at town meeting to answer questions. So it gets, so we can get it approved and move on. So it's a really complex question. There's a lot of cost centers, but I do think there's a lot of volatility too, particularly in special education. Out of district placement, the use of circuit breaker funding is really important. I think the school district has done an outstanding job of like bringing up the circuit breaker funding rollover to 50%. Like that's so incredibly important to provide a buffer for some of the volatility that we have within special education costs. But building those things out and then really relying on, I say this all the time, relying on experts. Like I think Mr. Girardi and his staff are certainly there. My conversation with Mr. Mizikar this morning were very productive in terms of his vision and how he operates within the town side. So again, it requires a lot of partnership, a lot of trust, and a lot of oversight for sure. And I think relying on those people to build the budget and have runways. And every year we have this of like what the timeline is, adhering to timelines that make sense for the community, adhering to timelines that make sense to our school leaders and also our staff, and then landing where we need to land at the time frame as it relates to negotiation, conversation, final approval, and then to town meeting. So yeah, there's a lot that goes into it, and it's incredibly complex, but we have really great people, and Meg Bazydlo as well as our Assistant Superintendent for Student Services, Amy Clowder for Assistant Superintendent for Curriculum Instruction. Those people all weigh in terms of what we have to do, so thanks.
Now that you have the budget proposal,
Right.
how will you communicate the
Yeah.
complex financial information to the school committee and the broader community? Provide as an example.
Yeah, I think part of that is like really simply as possible, because the Chapter 70 funding is extremely complex, right? And trying to elaborate the complexities in a way that's simple, and yet, the messaging is really important. Like we worked on messaging a bunch of years ago when we had an initiative around teacher evaluation. There's 3 key messages. If you've asked anyone in the district to ask the 3 key messages around evaluation, our staff could repeat them like on spot. So I think that's part of that, is trying to, how do you cultivate that, or how do you show that to people? I think part of it is like, the success I've had in terms of engaging community in my role currently is like inviting people in for conversation, having coffees, visiting the men's club or senior center. I think those are really critical, because sometimes there's a lot of information in the zeitgeist, like I heard this or I saw this and it's not based in fact. And like, that's really dangerous because then you have to try and unscramble the fact and people don't trust you. And I think, given how we are in today's society of like an erosion of trust of just public institutions and institutions generally, like trying to be as clear and transparent and communicate as frequently as possible in ways that people understand. And what's that mean? Like, here's the bottom line budget, and here's what the number is, like, and here's what we have, here's our obligations, and here's where we're gonna have to do something about that. But again, I think part of that is really being out front of it and providing the community updates, whether it's through a public mechanism like school committee, but also through the community, through informal places. I know a number of years ago, we used to have we used to have these coffees and we invite people from central office to come down and help explain some of the things, to have parents understand better what was happening, so they had a more intimate setting in terms of how the budget was created, what the override would look like, all those things, which I think are really important. So using a similar model in terms of what's been effective, but also understanding too, like checking I talked about this earlier at one of these meetings, like familiarity bias, like I'm here, I've been here for a while, I also have to put mechanisms in place to make sure that I'm not saying, well, this is the way we've always done it. Like, so I have to take a critical eye to that, and I haven't done it before, right? I haven't done it in my role as a principal, and I haven't done it in a role as superintendent, so that's something new to me. And really looking at it and wondering, and my curiosity and questioning, and trying to figure out how we can best do that and what the strategy might be. But also depending on the people who've been here, and sometimes it's like, okay, that's gonna work, and sometimes like, well, maybe we have to do it differently. I don't know if that's gonna be successful, so we need to try something different. So evolving our current practices are certainly something that I'm intrigued by, but communicating clearly, transparently, in ways that people can understand, and in multiple modes, email, face-to-face. I love face-to-face communication, because I feel like people are overloaded with emails too, but providing opportunities for people to ask questions is so critically important.
Thank you.
Sure.
What is your vision for overcoming the need for an expansion of Shrewsbury High School simultaneous with the need for a Proposition 2.5 override?
Yeah. Well, again, I think it's a little bit of like, we have been the beneficiary of financial stability when you look in the paper or in our area of like just the number of people in communities who are facing significant reductions to programming and staffing. That doesn't serve students well, doesn't serve communities well, and impacts the entire community. So when I think of that, like, part of it is a little bit of being transparent and clear of like, what are the impacts of if we do or don't? What are the benefits of it? And if we don't do this, what's gonna happen? Like, what is gonna happen? It's hard, the 2021 override has provided a sense of safety and security for all staff, and I genuinely mean that. We haven't had conversations about layoffs, which we typically would start December, literally every year, I think, since I've been here. Maybe a couple of years when we had overrides that have passed. I have to look at the years back, but generally, the structural deficit of school funding, we've never been able to catch up with that, and that's what school districts face today. So the community's commitment to that operational override with the select board, the finance committee, the school committee, in the town manager's office and superintendent's office, like, critically important to keep core services there and help support students and families. In terms of communicating this, I would say, like, you have to tell the story. You have to kind of show what it is. We have 1,900 students at our building, and, it was originally designed for 1,475. So we're already overcrowded by about 500 students. And then the MSBA changed the specs. It's 1,200, it says now we can have 1,250 students in that building. I can tell you firsthand, it's a problem. We manage it. We do what we need to do. We keep on doing what we have to do, and kids are really resilient and persevere. But like, when we talk about adding teachers, like, and we've had this conversation before around like class size, like we don't have physical space to continue to add teachers. Like, we're almost at the limit. So that means adding programming. Like, if we want to do different programming, like, what's that look like? Like, I'm not sure if we've been cited in the past because we haven't had adequate space for students to conduct PTOT. Like, that's a challenge. Like, should we use closets for that? We've taken display cases, we cannibalize display cases to make an office space for someone. We've taken conference room to make them office spaces to help our adjustment counselors meet one-on-one with kids with really significant needs. So, you know, the space was designed not to be cannibalized. I remember when I arrived here, I was like, you're never gonna need another space, and you're never, this thing is, we're totally outfitted for the future, foreseeable future, and we quickly outgrew that space. I could see, you know, a couple, 100 over, and this variability in enrollments, but that we've just grown so significantly and steady. Where a lot of school districts have seen a dip in enrollment, we haven't. At the high school, we haven't. So it's gonna persist. The other question I have is like, if we want to offer families opportunities to have kids explore, students explore something other than English, math, science, and social studies, like, we just don't have the space. Like, we need to do some innovative if we want to do innovative program, we need a bigger footprint. Like, we just purchased a machine to come in for our advanced manufacturing program. It really, like, sure, we clean things out and we're gonna make the space for it, but it's a challenge, because we just don't have this, we have to dedicate one space for it. And we're really at the limit of what we can do there. So, you know, does it provide other opportunities? Does it provide classroom space? Does it provide opportunities we can expand programming to allow students to investigate things that they might want to study? Maybe I want to go into trade. Maybe I want to go into military. Maybe I want to go into a college, a 2-year college, or a technical school, or a 4-year college. Like, without that, and without providing people opportunities to investigate that, and providing the square footage for that, for a building, is gonna, you know, it's not gonna be great for kids. However, so we have that, when the feasibility study, we're entering that, which will be in a couple of years of finding out what the cost will be, all that stuff, and that will work through an educational program, that'll be part of it, and then we have to find out what it might cost, and then ultimately we have to figure out that goes forward through debt exclusion and working with the boards in town, and all that. In terms of operational overrides, like, that's been a godsend for our community, and it's been a godsend for our families and our students, and it's been a godsend for our staff, not worrying about if they're gonna have a job next year. It has created stability not only in program, but also staffing, and I think school districts struggle with staffing. I think we all struggle with staffing, but it's created some sense of stability here. So, messaging what the impacts will be if we don't want to move forward with that. Here's what the impact will be through pre-K to 4, and 5, 6, and 7, 8, and 9, 12, and be able to work with leaders around the district to identify what those things will be or be missing from that, and then sharing it with the community. In a very transparent way. It's like kind of black and white. Here's what will happen if we don't do it, and here's what will happen if we do it. And that can be a pretty compelling story. So working with the publics around that, for sure, is something that we need to do. It's a challenge that is exciting. But it's going to require a lot of work. And ultimately, it will be up to the voters to decide. But articulating the story behind why we need to do why we're doing is really, really important.
Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, how would you balance financial realities with maintaining education qualities during a budget reduction? And what would be the first area that you would reduce?
No easy questions, huh? Yeah, this is really hard. Because for me, like, people say, well, we have extracurriculars. It's like, there's no such thing as extra. Like, I always say they're co-curriculars, because it's so contingent upon developing students' whole learning experience, like whole body, everything they do is really supports the programming we have. And when we look at, when I consider your question of what we would reduce, I mean, the easiest thing to do is look at the fringe stuff, like what can we get by without? So that might require a look at co-curriculars. That might look at a require of like fees. Do we charge more for athletics, or do we charge more for busing? But really the number that we've, in the past, that we've had to reduce, because there's not really a lot there now, is staff. So what's that mean? It means students might not have a school adjustment counselor. They might not have a school counselor. They might be in classes of 26 or 28 or 32. So class size is definitely going to impact. What's that mean? The larger the class size, at least in my experience, the larger the class size, sometimes kids can get lost. They get lost because we have to manage so many students. Teachers have to manage students. Teachers have to assess so many students. Leads to teacher burnout, demoralizes staff. But it's a number, right? When we look at the numbers of how the budget's constructed, 86% is salaries. If you can cut as far as you can cut, then you have to look. You're gonna really have to look at staff. So it's trying to get through all the things that you could do, shifting costs, moving things around. Absolutely, that's like priority one. So I can't give you a clear cut answer of like what that would look like. I have to have more context. But I think taking that stuff first, curriculum, instruction, assessment materials, that might have to go down to 0. We've done that. We did that for a bunch of years, which was detrimental to our program. But that prevented times for eliminating staff. So we got to figure that piece out. That I'd rely on principals and district leadership team to help advise and see where the thing, see what the items are, or the cost centers are, or what's critical need, and then make really some hard decisions. Like, I don't relish those days and having those conversations. I wasn't in that seat, but we did have conversations of like, I need you to get me to here, and it's like, okay. And then you start having these conversations. Behind every one of those conversations typically is programming that's going to impact students or people. It's going to impact students and their quality of their education, but also their family and their communities, wherever they may reside.
Thank you.
In terms of communication, superintendent, how would you ensure staff, families, community members with differing opinions feel genuinely heard and respected? And can you describe any specific strategies you used to help build that level of trust and navigate through challenging or conflicting perspectives?
Yeah, right. I think, this work is entirely human. I feel like it's so much at the human end. And given the current state we're in our society, like this is one of these areas where I've dug in a little bit in terms of my curiosity of how to maybe get better at this. I've read a lot on how do we try and bridge the gap between people who might be polarized or have differing opinions. And some of the work I've read is pretty interesting stuff. Like Donna Hicks around dignity. There's a book called Dignity, Leading with Dignity. Arthur Brooks, Love Your Enemies. It's kind of a tough title, however, really kind of captures what's happening in America today. Renee Girard, Richard Rohr, we can go through a list of people. Amanda Ripley is one of them, high conflict. I actually saw Amanda Ripley speak at a conference a couple summers ago. I thought she was great. It's basically how do you try and extract yourself from really high levels of conflict with people. And she uses a strategy that I think I've used in the past, but she puts a name to it. It's called looping. It values people by repeating what their concern might be in your own words to ensure that you understand what they're saying. And when you do that, the research would say, and Amanda Ripley would say, and all these other authors would say, that when people feel validated and heard, the temperature immediately comes down. And we try to work on focus what are commonalities. And that can be really hard work when people are really set or have a mindset of being very fixed around one particular issue. So, I think contempt is, in our society everywhere, and it's above anger. It's like disgust. And that's a challenge that we have across the board. So how do we kind of bridge that gap is your question. Really through listening and leaning in with curiosity and asking questions and validating what people say. And validating by understanding what they say. Because sometimes I hear things and it's like, I think you just heard you say this. And the reality of it is, it's like, that's not what they said at all. So when I repeat things back and this happened recently with me in working with someone who was really upset and highly escalated, was like, this is what I think I heard you say. Is that right? Like, no, that's not right. It's like, I want to help you. I want to understand more. So tell me again, like, restate it for me. I really want to empathize with you. I understand this. So say it again. And they articulated their concern. And it's like, okay, this is what I think I heard you say. Now, is this what you said? And like, that is absolutely what I said. It's like, okay, so let's talk about that then. So, and that requires a lot of patience, a lot of skill, in treating people with dignity. I've never heard of anyone be humiliated, which is the atomic bomb of human emotions, or insulted to change your opinion about anything. It just doesn't happen. So listening with care, listening with curiosity, trying to understand where people are coming from, and then navigating that with, treating them with dignity and kindness and caring. I mean, compassion, empathy. That's how I've really operated from all of it, from some really volatile situations with either students. I think that's how I crafted some of the things that how I operate now, like really difficult students and who are, they can be, they're kids, they're upset, I get it. But treating them in a way that's not like escalating it, that never works. And insulting and humiliating people, I gotta tell you, that never works either. So I think that's part of it, John, is really like looking at what that might look like for people, but listening with care and trying to figure out the best way to kind of meet.
What would be your number one priority during your first 6 months in the role?
Yeah, right. So yeah, I think of like, well, again, for me, it's like my philosophy has always been wherever I worked is being visible and present. It's being visible and present during the school day. It's being visible and present after school and activities and events, whether they're school events, whether they're community events, like your presence and visibility. There's a piece of this role that is highly public, highly visible. And if you're leading a district, you have to be there. And you have to be present. And that sends a powerful message to students and families and community members when you're invested in that. I've done that. I said to staff today around, they talked about the pace of the job and how difficult it is and the number of nights and all. And I said, I do about 110 nights a year. And my assistant principals or the assistant principals at the high school are doing, I don't know how many more beyond whatever I don't make. The other, a bunch of us went down to Barnstable the other night to be visible and present for our basketball coach who was retiring, and we thought maybe it was going to be his last game, so we want to be there for him. So, I think part of that is being visible, present, having a sense of where the community is. And I think when I think of the first 6 months, for me, it's like listening sessions and actively listening and taking things in and taking that, familiarity bias, I like to call it, of checking what I might think is like safe and easy and saying, is that really safe and easy? Is that the easiest way to do this, or should I be looking at something else? And then I have a network of people within the community that I know that I often run by things with and say, tell me I'm wrong here, or I want you to be as honest as you possibly can be, because I feel like this seems like it's a trap or too easy. And here's what I'm worried about. And sometimes like, you're absolutely right, or you're missing this, you realize this, and I'm like, oh my God, I had no idea. So getting differing opinions about those things, conducting like the listening tour in terms of wherever that might be, at whatever school it might be, but being visible and present for our staff and being visible and present for students, and also being visible and present for members of our community. But I also will tell you this, I'm not a person that's going to say, yeah, I'm going to sit and listen around for the first year. That's just not that's not my natural inclination. My inclination is like, let's collect the data, let's figure out what's working, what's not working, and what are people avoiding to talk about that's not working, and let's make adjustments. So those are really kind of things that I would look for in the first, let's say 100 days. You say 6 months, I say 100 days, and then maybe set a course to support what I think we need to take some actions around, how do we maybe take some corrective actions or put some measures in place. But I'm not someone that's going to sit around and wait. That's not my nature. And I say this, it doesn't come from me saying like, we're going to change this immediately. Here's my observations and here's a problem I'm seeing. Now we have to collaborate. My leadership style has always been, let's rely on the people in the room in our schools to talk about these issues and see how real they are. And then what are the possible scalable solutions on top of everything else they have to do. Like if we need to change one thing right now based upon these 3 or 4 things I've found, what can we do that works in your school community? What will work for us? And we can do it and do it with fidelity and say that's going to improve the quality of whatever it may be for students, instruction, environment, and what can we do to help support staff and make their jobs easier, right? Because like we do something that's like, there's nothing worse than I think you do something that's like we're doing it for doing its sake, and it's like, why are we doing that? And everyone hates it, but no one wants to talk about it. Like, are there opportunities for us to evolve and eliminate some of those things? I don't know. But certainly, I'm not sure changing it is, but getting a lay of the landscape and then making some progress based upon what the feedback is from the community and the constituents that we serve. And then really digging in with leadership team and staff around creating potential study groups or whatnot to try and come up with solutions to those issues. if I had all the solutions, I mean, it would be great. But the reality is like I say this today too, like a lot of the things you see on the resume are like the good work of people that we surround ourselves with and empower them to do the work. That's kind of been my style. And we've had a lot of great programming, and it's not like the Todd Bazydlo, all these things. It's really, if I could add everything, a name to every one of those things on my resume, someone else has helped me get there. And I think that's really important that we engage people that way. So 6 months, I don't know, 100 days, maybe too ambitious, we'll see.
Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, if selected, how would you navigate the transition from a peer to becoming the superintendent, particularly in managing staff with whom you were previously working as a colleague?
Yeah. Well, again, I think we have, I did this in my previous district when I moved up from a teacher and kind of director of our community service program to an administrator. And that was a little bit different because it felt like I was young, certainly young in my career, and I had different relationships with people. Like part of that was I had some really strong relationships with people I worked with. We was like one of the first people hired in that building, and like one of the first 3 new hires in like 25 years. So we were like the new guys or new kids on the block, so to speak. And so we kind of got together, but that continued to expand. So I have experience doing that. It's creating boundaries. I think now for us is like, what are the expectations? What are the boundaries? And being clear about what, when you're clear is kind, and setting what the standard is, and then trying to support people the best we possibly can. I also know that people would, because my familiarity with them, would think they may have a different level of access. I certainly wouldn't want to prohibit access to people in terms of sharing information, but I certainly also have a job in terms of making sure that the district is running appropriately and we're meeting the standards based upon whatever that might be. It's like supervision and evaluation, it's our strategic planning, it's our school improvement plans, like overseeing those things and supporting them and coaching people. Yeah, I think for me, I've had experience with it. I have some really great relationships with people. I don't foresee them necessarily changing, in a sense of I'm now the boss and you're not the boss. I don't know. That's not my style. We certainly want to have collaborate. And I said this before, and I've said it before. It's like you can have accountability and compassion. I mean, you can have accountability and empathy. It works. It's like you can have high standards, and when people don't meet them, as long as you're clear and here's what we have to do and here's how we're going to move forward, that works. It's worked in the past for me, so it's a model that I'm familiar with and could continue to do or continue to use.
Okay, thank you.
Imagine you need to evaluate or redirect the work of someone who who was previously was your peer.
Sure.
How would you approach this conversation?
Yeah, well, I think it's all contextual, right? So I think if you just take whatever the example may be, we need to make an adjustment as it relates to some sort of practice, whatever that practice may be. It's like having firm, clear expectations, what that might look like, understanding why we are where we are, like listening with empathy and curiosity, and then trying to chart a course together. Because ultimately, you can direct people to do things, right? But it certainly feels more helpful, and there's going to be probably a greater likelihood of meeting the goals that you set if you work together to develop the plan. But again, if you know what the goals are and say, I need to get here, what's the best way we can do this? And then you can evaluate the goals and help coach people on what the steps they need to take. But again, setting out clear guidelines, setting out formal process, formal steps, doing multiple check-ins, leading with a no surprises model of like, I need to be, you need to be transparent with me when things aren't working, and I need to be transparent with you when things aren't working. Has worked for me in the past. We've had people that have, certainly have needed support, and we've provided support plans based on our supervision evaluation process. They're hard conversations to have, no doubt. But because they're hard, doesn't mean I'm not going to have them. Someone has told me you're the king of uncomfortable conversations. It's like, okay, well, thank you. I'm not sure if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but, lean into the awkward. Someone told me once, you just lean into that awkward, huh? Like, yeah, sometimes. But again, if we base everything around what's in the best interest of students, and we're making our decision of if it's a student-centered decision, whatever that means, what's the impact on students, and we have to make our decisions on what we think is the best, then that's how we kind of I would frame the conversation, and how do we get there? And it might be clear as me what I think you need to do. And there's times where it's like, it's clear, and I might say, let's talk about it and tell me more why you think that, tell me more. And then I might add in like, nope, this is what we're gonna need to do. Like, we're gonna need to add additional step, and here's why. And here's one of the things that I think you're missing. So, yeah, that's how I handle that. I've done that in the past.
Thank you.
Sure.
How do you navigate situations in which a parent calls for changes that you believe may not align with the long-term interests of the district? How do you balance responsiveness with principled leadership? And after you make a significant decision, how do you engage with the criticism for that decision while maintaining trust and transparency?
Yeah, I might have to add, there's like multiple, I should have wrote that question down. Well, again, I think part of it, people want to be heard, right, and validate their concerns, validate it, and, you know, my communication style is I don't like emailing people back and forth. I always typically say, you know, I don't want to go back and forth in email, kind of, is there a time we can set up a call and have a conversation, at least minimally? And from that conversation, glean some more information. And then certainly if I think we need more time, like, for me, I want to sit face-to-face with people. Email for me is never, and this happens frequently, I think everyone has an experience like this. The back and forth email stuff never works. It just never really works the way it's intended to work. It's great for like providing facts, but not for managing emotion, because you can't read it in terms of the tone, in terms of the body language, in terms of all those things. So I think that's part of it. And I think ultimately, like, you know, we've made hard decisions around things that, you know, I'm not sure how hard they are, but I think there's some decisions we made that people aren't happy with. The best I can do is articulate why we made the decision, share my thinking about why we made the decision, share about the thinking, what that thinking means for not only, you know, the situation in their family, but also what it means for the greater school district and community, and what the impact could be for other families based upon a decision. What is the decision? Is it a decision that's going to be something financial that we're not going to be able to promise everyone else? I have no idea. So it's like all those things come into factor, and I think people can get these that fixed mindset where they just really want to know, like, they want an answer they want, and then they don't get that answer. And I've delivered many of those, had those tough conversations with people, and then they become very critical of you. And I think the mode of criticism is like online. And, you know, online criticism is great, but it really only tells part of the story. The other challenge we have as a like public entity is like, we don't necessarily get to control the narrative. We try and control the narrative, right? By sharing our story, but there's times where we can't just because of confidentiality. And as much as like to share like stories of like, this is how we did this, or this is how here's a problem and how we handled it. And it would make perfect sense, but the reality is I'm not going to break the confidentiality of a student and a parent and family. It's just not going to happen. So then it's left in the zeitgeist of it's out there and this is what's in, no one's responding, and can you believe they did this? And it's like, I wish I really could respond to defend myself or defend the actions or the decision. And I don't think people realize that either, right? And that's one of the challenges. So I've certainly had my fair share of criticism here in town, and from probably multiple constituents, where sometimes staff isn't happy with the decision I made. Students haven't been happy with decisions I made. Parents haven't been happy with the decision I made. But ultimately, my decisions are rooted in what I think is the best interest of students, what's in the best interest of our school, in our school district, and also our community. And really the anchor for all that, or the foundation, is our core values and beliefs. And how those core values and beliefs that we have as a school district, that we evaluate and we hold dear, and not compromising that. And we've had, and we've just announced this saying before, it's like, you gotta be hard on the issue and soft on the people. Like, no one likes telling people no. Like, yeah, I want to say yes as many times as I possibly can to every single person I possibly can to make everyone feel great. That's not the reality though, right? So, I think I answered most of the parts of that question, and if not, I'll certainly, if you want to follow up, I'll certainly ask answer anything you might
I
have.
think
follow-
we answered it.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, it's a hard one. Yeah, and the internet is outstanding and also can be very damaging for people. And then the algorithm just feeds you where you're living. And a side note, sorry, I know we have another question, but I recently attended a webinar on like the radicalization of youth in America. And they talked about that, like how radicals in our society are targeting young kids, like through Minecraft, through roadblocks, through like Discord, like things I knew but really didn't know. So it's kind of eye-opening. So the internet's kind of a dangerous place for sure. And once you get in that feed of constantly whatever you're in, it just continues to feed it because we have a physiological reaction. Dopamine's released in the brain of like gets you so angry. It's like the angry industrial complex of like whatever's posted online is outrage.
You answered my next question.
Oh, sorry, John, sorry.
Okay.
Sorry.
Appreciate it. So I'm gonna hand it over to Aaron.
Can you share an example of how you built trust with a community that felt disconnected from its school leadership?
Yeah, well, sure. We have students who don't, we have, 40% of, almost 40% of our school district, English isn't their first language, right? And I think we had students who were coming from other countries who might have not had their English acquisition, who had a different cultural assimilation in terms of what their schooling looked like and where they're from. I won't use where they're from. But they had challenges like school rules, like going to class on time and doing these things and the way they treated their peers and staff and all these things. And like part of how you build bridges with people, at least in my experience, and is like, again, showing up and being present. So being present in the spaces they are and trying to work through whatever, in this case, translation tools we have to understand where they're coming from, why they are doing the things they're doing, and trying to continually build trust with families. And, for our immigrant population, like first gen people in our community, for some, not all, but for some, like the idea is like, I don't want to hear from school. And I'm not going to go, as parents, I'm not going to go to school they call. Your job's to go to school and do what you got to do at school. I don't want to be called. But trying to partner with parents of explaining what's happening in school, having conversations with school through translation services, really being on top of that. Because ultimately we want their students to succeed. We want the students to have really good experience and feel like they belong in our communities. But doing that requires a lot of time. It's a lot of time to meet with people. It's a lot of time to build relationships, a lot of time to build trust. And how you build trust with those communities is like what you say is what you do. And they understand that. If they say, okay, I'm going to do X on this time, or I'm going to call you on Friday at this time because I know you're working, I'm going to call them at that time. Or I have a meeting at this time, I'm going to make sure that I'm going to be there on time for that meeting. Like prioritizing people's time is really important. And then trying to figure out, like, there's times where we've come in early to work. Like, I think the assistant principals have done this. I've seen this. Like, I can only get there at 6 o'clock because I have to be at Boston for 7. Or I can only be there at 5:30. Can you do it? Like, AM, sure. Like, there's outstanding things that happen that we can't control, but we need to get a hold of people. So part of that is in our words and our actions and living, kind of sharing with them what our lived experience is with, in a way, and what they want for the children to aspire to, and what we can do to help them meet those goals. But there's a lot of trust building because there is, some of our communities, there's a lot of distrust of authority and school leaders and those things. But our success has been really trying to bring people into conversations, have conversations, and do the things we say we're going to do to support what their children, what they're going to do. So,
Thank you. What is your plan to get to know the school committee? How do you plan to build and maintain a transparent, cohesive, and strong working relationship with the members?
yeah, great. So this is something I'm a little bit unfamiliar with, but I have some ideas behind it. I mean, I've always operated from a no surprises model. I'm sure if the current superintendent has called you and said, I just want to let you know that the high school principal has called me and told me X, and this might be getting some air wherever that might be, and on the internet or in local media. So operating a no surprise model for me is like being really clear and transparent about what my communication is and having lines of communication open. Working to get to know your styles and how you work kind of as a group is really important. And one of the ways we do that is like, I can envision doing the workshop piece that we have. I envision having conversations with committee members prior to school committee to find out like the variety of reports that we have that are presented. There's a lot of information in those reports. For you to digest those over the weekend and then come up with questions to ensure that you might need clarity to streamline like the process of what the meetings might look like are really important. So yeah, there's time that we're gonna have to have a conversation. I would envision people being called weekly to find out like what's happening, give a temperature check, working through the chair, having individual time for members for sure. But ultimately, like working from a no surprise model is like communicating as quickly as I can to the people that are overseeing the school district as part of your, stewardship in your elected position. And also bringing you into our communities. I think of our school council nights where we bring everyone together. I mean, having opportunities for you to visit. And I know I've invited you to, opportunities at our school. There should be, I'm sure there's opportunities at other schools where you can be present and show that you're there. And those informal conversations is how we build trust too. And then trying to find the best ways to communicate. And then really getting feedback on what you want that model to look like. Because we do it away now doesn't mean we need to do it the way it is. But if the way works and we think it's the most efficient way, then that's okay too. So I think part of my strength is having conversations beyond like the work that we do, like getting to know people, getting to know their interests, getting to know where they stand, getting to know people more on a human level. And that really has been, for my entire career, has been the heart and soul of my work. My cover letter said this, and I firmly believe this. I said this like 100 times today, so I'm going to continue to say it. Like Michael Fullen had a book called Leading in a Culture of Change. I read it a long time ago. But it's something that stuck with me my entire career. It's like he says, like, it's all about relationships, relationships, relationships. So how do you cultivate those relationships with everybody, including the school committee, and keeping them aware of what's happening? So I'm sorry I didn't say we're going to go to Six Flags and ride roller coasters together and do team bonding, but some of the work I've done around the Dignity Index too would be important to share with the elected officials in terms of how do we interact with public when we face criticism, how do we treat each other respectfully and kindly with compassion and care. And there's some really good ideas behind that, which has expanded my curiosity around this even prior to attending this training, which I recently attended a couple weeks ago. So yeah, I'm always feel like I'm learning, so I'm always welcome to certainly feedback to improve my practice.
Okay, can you describe a time when a governing body did not support your recommendations? And what steps did you take to listen, communicate your perspective, and then find common ground?
Governing body, that's kind of hard, right? I'm not sure I can talk about a governing body per se, because I think, yeah, I'd like to say, yeah, sure, we need overrides on these years, and they didn't necessarily agree,
Or
so.
how about like, you have directors that report to you,
Oh,
that type
sure.
of reportability.
Yeah. And can you repeat the question now with that perspective? Sorry.
Yeah. Can you describe a time when, like, the directors at the high school
Sure.
or any other type of group that you work with did not support your recommendation? What steps did you take to listen, communicate your perspective, and find common ground?
Oh, goodness. I mean, there's like 100 examples here. Well, I think leading's hard, right? So it's like trying to figure out what those things are. There was an example a number of years ago where we were looking to add something on because I thought this is a really great idea for high school generally. It was advisory. And I felt like advisory was, and part of it, quite frankly, was rooted in our work around our school accreditation. And it resonated with me because like we wanted to have every student should have one trusted adult in that. And part of this is how do we get there? And there's still, and we're not there yet, right, with advisory, we're still not there. I'll be frank, and I think if you ask anyone at the high school, that we're gonna have mixed success with advisory. And people have told me, like, we can't do it this way, we need to do it this way, and I've persisted. And then I've also, turned the volume down on some of the things that I want to do with this. And people have said, you can't do this because we have this much going on, like, I said this today, and I think the public forum was like, I'm not gonna tell you I'm not gonna tell you what to do, but this is what you need to do. I think those trusting relationships where people can say that to me, and I know that like I'm out of bounds in terms of like I'm demanding too much based on that. And there's other times where I've said, no, we have to persist and move on. But advisory was one of those things that was really tricky for us. We trained all these people right up to the pandemic. We had such momentum, and then the pandemic happened, and like the wheels just fell off the thing. And I said during the pandemic, we have to connect with kids. We have to see them. We're in real trouble. Like, it felt like the world was ending, right? And people were isolated, which is the worst, as we've come to learn. So, I'm like, we gotta have kids turn on the cameras. We gotta have kids see where they are. We have to see what they're doing. And it's like really weird for kids too, because like, I don't want you in my bedroom because my parents are working next door. So it was just, the whole thing was really awkward. But as we returned back and the advisory program we're using at Time Character Strong, we launched it during the pandemic, which is probably not the best idea. I thought it was the best idea at the time because I just wanted to make sure kids were okay. We didn't get the traction we needed with it, and the work that we laid out for the foundation just kind of fell apart. So trying to regroup that, bring it back, and engaging staff to study why it didn't work, and then allowing staff to develop their own kind of program as it relates to some of the CASEL competencies, connected to Character Strong. That was pretty successful. But we still didn't have full fidelity with that. So part of what I did too, I'm not sure if you're familiar with this story, but I actually went and we had teachers who were out all the time for COVID, so I'd like fill in for advisories. And I basically adopted an advisory, and I worked with a teacher over the course of like 3 years, and like the most rewarding time I had in terms of like engaging with students and staff was working that advisory. And we did like some really cool stuff in that advisory program. But not everyone was getting the same experience, so it wasn't coherence and fidelity across. So it's like continue to do that work of like how do we continue to push on that. And now we have a new program, Wayfinder, which is a little bit different, which we have turbulence with that because we've made a change after we made a significant investment in Character Strong in our kind of own program that's connected to competency. So yeah, there's turbulence there. But we're continuing on because it's an important piece of what I believe is like, we need every kid connected to one trusted adult. Because when things go sideways in people's lives, they need someone to turn to. And not everyone has a mom and dad at home that they can do that with. And not everyone has someone that they can do that with in their own friend group. So who is that gonna be? So somewhat non-negotiable in landing the plane, trying to negotiate how to end that. But yeah, that's been a challenge, and certainly we're not where we need to be with that, but we gotta continue to work on it.
And the next question is, how would you handle a situation where the school committee remains against your recommendation? How would you move forward with the school committee members after the disagreement?
Yeah, I think trying to understand the perspective and why there's disagreement and understand like why, help me understand better why, and then what are we gonna do to move forward? And then what are suggestions you have of how, if we think we're gonna scrap a program or do whatever it might be, is like trying to figure that piece out and really just working through through conversations and then potentially coming back with potential solutions. And maybe it might say, I can't get on board with this because of X. It's like, okay, if we remove X, what's that look like? And is that something that is palatable? Do you think that would be okay? And talking to people about that, talking to you about that. But again, for me, it's like, people can say no, and that's fine. And it's like, for me, it's like, we got to move on because there's so many other things to do too, right? It's like, I'm not going to perseverate on it. It's like, okay, here's what the decision is. It's like, okay, we got to do that and move on. And then it's like managing some of the, being the lead for some of the follow of like, well, why didn't you do this? Like, we need to do X. And it's like, well, okay, yeah, sure. So being the person that's in front of that for our staff is really important. And helping support them with whatever decisions we make as a group collectively, and then what the district does is really important. But mostly through communication And if it's on the phone or face-to-face is the way that I solve a lot of those issues. And, yeah, people make decisions and I don't, it's like, we just gotta move on. Like, I don't harbor ill will. It's just like, okay, it's like, we gotta advance the work.
Thank you.
Sure.
Please describe your leadership style and how it has evolved over time.
Yeah, well, I kind of said this earlier, but like my leadership style is in really human-centered, data-informed, highly collaborative, empowering people to do the work. Those are really great words, right? What's that mean? In the past that I've taken leads on things, I felt like I always had to have the answer. And this is early in my career and even, and I continue to grow from that perspective of like, you don't need to have all the answers. And then how do you try and find the right people to move agenda items forward, whatever they may be? And identifying when people have passions about a topic, an issue, and how do you listen to those passions and how do you make whatever they want, or how do you actualize a vision for what that would look like? So that's the vision, and it's really like human-centered, is about the relationship for sure. But the other piece that I would say about cultivating things or empowering people through a distributive framework is really how I've led, and I've gotten better at this, is letting people do the work and being, along with people in partnership and supporting. And there's times where I have to say, like, we're not going to do this and we should pivot, but doing a lot of debriefing, doing a lot of support, talking like what the next steps might be. And that, an example I'll use that might be a little bit tangible to this is like before Innovation Career Pathways, I went to, 1-8 Foundation has funded a lot of initiatives through our school district, through grant funding, particularly Project Lead the Way programming. And we had Project Lead the Way programming at the high school, and I went to visit a school, and then someone said, you really need to check out the biomedical program. And I talked to people and I said, what do you think about biomedical programming? We don't have room for it in our schedule. I'm like, okay, let's go visit the biomedical programming locally and let's go have a conversation what that looks like and meet with some people. So we met with some people, had some conversation, and then I had a connection out east a long time ago where they had biomedical programming at their school. And I said to our science and engineering director, I was like, let's go visit this school to go look at the biomedical program. I'm like, I'm not sure if I really want to, I'm not sure I'm really going to go, but it was like, okay, I'll do this. And I said, who would be the champion of the program? Like, who you think would be super jazzed about it? Like, let's talk about your people in your department. We talked about people. And ultimately, identified someone who, we thought would take a look at it. And they left to visit. I didn't go visit. I wanted to do this on their own because I knew kind of where I was on the topic. And they came back like really enthusiastic, energized, and engaged, and really took the ball and ran with it. And that kind of began our biomedical programming. And there was sacrifices we had to make in our curricular programming as a result of that, because we had a certain amount of money, a certain amount of sections. But that was a function of teacher-led, director-led initiatives that have benefited scores of students. I kind of serve as a connector for a lot of these things. Malcolm Gladwell has a book, it's like, are you a maven, are you a connector? Like, I find my role to be somewhat of a connector in terms of trying to find opportunities, empowering people to do that, and then putting them in the best position to succeed. And that's ranged from, when we eliminated class rank, we talked about that. There's a lot of resistance in eliminating class rank. And we had a study group for it. And there was, some community pushback and teacher pushback and even student and family pushback. And what people didn't understand at the time was that colleges and universities, look for reasons to not accept people. And an example was clear as day to me. We had a student who had really great metrics that didn't get into one school. The sibling came through and had, I would say better metrics, and then didn't get into the same schools because we reported what people's rank was. And one of the criteria for getting into some of these colleges, you need to be in the top 10% of your class. It's like they immediately say you're not in the top 10% of your class. Well, now you're eliminated. We can find someone else. So, and so many schools are doing it at the time. I think we weren't out in front of this, but this is a long, long time ago. I think it might have been early in my principalship, maybe 2012, 2013, 14. But when we eliminated that, guess what happened? Like we all of a sudden saw the spike in these acceptances. So there is some data behind that, and all the private schools, like really, Phillips Academy, Phillips Exeter, none of those schools report class rank. So it was a benefit that people didn't see that was kind of providing obstacles for students, so. But that was a function of me having a vision and then getting people around it and trying to tell people what that vision is and storytelling it, to get it where it was, and we did that, and it's been a benefit for our students and families for years, which I think is, that's when when students are having success, it's like organizational success is measured by our student success. So we've had some success there.
Just wanted to give you a heads up.
Yeah.
4 questions and
Oh.
about 15 minutes left. So,
What aspects of the district or the superintendent responsibilities do you expect will stretch your leadership the most, and how do you plan to grow in those areas?
Yeah, right. So I've never built the school district's budget, right? So literally relying on people that are been doing it and the experts in it and supporting people there. I think leading schools, I have a good sense of that. I have a good sense of relationship building. I have a good sense of what I think needs to happen in terms of communication, being clear and consistent and frequent. I also think of like special education, and I used to serve, like in my previous role, I was like a team chair in my high school for my class. So it was like I kind of served as that for the special education department. So I have some experience there, but I'm not totally experienced in the special education department. Grant funding, sure, I've written grants. We've gotten lots of grants and got lots of money, and that's great. But also, like, what's that mean when it comes to, different types of funding from different mechanisms, whether it's Title II or Title III, or, how we use those things. So really the financial piece would probably be the biggest stretch. The comfortability is, for me, would be just the human approach that I take to how I interact with people and listen to people and try and share concerns in a way that's, clear, transparent, and honest. Yeah.
What do you see as the district's greatest challenge and opportunity?
Yeah, challenge is always going to be stability around financials, right? I feel like. And that that's a huge team effort across the board from multiple constituents and groups and boards and all those. So that's one major thing. I think budgeting, sure. Staffing is always an issue. I think we look at staff well-being. And, most importantly, I talk about student well-being. Like, we have challenges across the board with student well-being and their emotional, state, and what we can do to best support them. We have programs in place, and I think we've made some really significant gains, but we still have, we have some real challenges. So those are a few that I would say are the biggest. In terms of opportunity, opportunity for us is, again, it's hard, but trying to figure out how we expand programming to include schools to generate students' passion and interest at the youngest age possible, have them find ways to pursue that passion and interest, and realize that I really don't like this and I don't want to do this anymore, or I really want to try and investigate something else. And I think of one of the programs we have is around our career technical education program, developing innovation career pathways, taking a look at programming our lunch and learns. We had a career fair, which was a phenomenal success yesterday, Tuesday. And the people that turned out, like community members of our community that actually came out and interacted with our 10th grade students, it was awesome. So trying to expand those opportunities across the board the best we can, providing the best opportunities for kids. And for us, it's like, what's that look like before? And I've said this many times, but what are we going to do to ensure that people can make an informed decision by the time they end high school of what they want to do? And not spend $94,000 to go to a school that they're not sure what they're going to do and not sure what the degree is going to make. We have to provide families and students with, opportunities to explore and make financially sound decisions upon their, approaching the runway at graduation. Because we can certainly apply to schools and do all those things, but then ultimately you got to say what you want to do. So, and I think we built on that. We still have room to grow. There's still more opportunity there. We're just not there yet. And the internship program is like a home run for me. But that's gonna be labor intensive and a lot of hard work. The people we have working right now do it really well. But we gotta continue to expand that, and we gotta continue to push on our business partners. And I say push, but certainly bring them in to provide more opportunities for students. And there's challenges with that too, with our schedule. With the high school schedules, like, there's a lot of challenges that, I don't wanna elaborate here right now, I certainly can, but, having students have that experience before they leave and be like, yes, this is what I wanna do, is really, really empowering, and I think when you do that and you make an investment, that's like, awesome, I'm glad I did that.
So this is the last question. Why are you the right leader for Shrewsbury Public Schools at this time?
Yeah, right, so, first of all, thanks for everything. I really appreciate it. And I appreciate the question and time you spent. I know how long this process has been for everyone. I think I'm uniquely qualified in terms of the skills that I have. I've positioned myself to be a part of district level initiatives that we've seen come to fruition. One of the things when we talk about initiatives that continue on, of like the portrait of a graduate, the work that I've done at district level for that is still in place, still remarkable. I look at Mr. Wensky said this, around the opportunities, the greatest opportunities. There's so many opportunities that get me excited around potentially leading the district. And, part of those opportunities rely on knowing that we have a really stable staff, we have financial stability within the district, but also to continuing to provide opportunities for students and knowing the people that are doing that. I feel like I have a good lay of the land in terms of what it looks like in terms of our community, what the needs of the community are, how we can pivot rather quickly if we need to adjust to those demands. I also think I have the skills and capacities where it's a natural step for me to move up to a superintendent position, to lead a bigger district. And I've said this, like leading the largest high school in central Massachusetts. I might be, I know this is public, I might be the longest tenured high school principal in Worcester County, maybe second to another one that's in our league. Like superintendent's job is incredibly difficult. Leadership jobs right now are incredibly difficult. We've been incredibly fortunate of having stability within the district. So trying to leverage the stability, the relationships I've developed with our business partners, the relationships I've developed with families. You do the math, I think I've encountered 10,000 students that have graduated from Shrewsbury High School during my tenure, which is just that's just a crazy number. So I think I'm uniquely positioned. I think I have the skills and attributes that match the core values of the community. I understand the priorities. I understand like what we need to do to continue to, I think, advance the work, and also not only advance it, but also evolve and make changes when we need to make changes.
Great. Thank you very much, Mr. Bazydlo.
Sure.
Can I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor shall signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Thank you and good night.